Welcome to this week's webinar. It is on the topic of pop-ups, which is my favorite topic ever. And so for this special occasion, I have made a little image of me celebrating custom pop-ups because they're great fun. We have them across lots of different templates, and we're going to be talking about the different kinds of pop-ups and all the great things you can do with them in today's webinar. My name is Luisa. You might know me from the support channels. And I also host webinars, so I'm hosting today's and I'm looking forward to it. So we're going to start off with why pop-ups. Pop-ups are a wonderful way of incorporating information that you can't display on your chart. So if we look at this example over here, we have a map shaded by forest area, but we also want to bring across some additional information, maybe on a category instead of a number. For example, here we're showing the income group, and pop-ups are a great way to do that. They also save space, so you don't have to create another chart or map just to show the income group, for example. And they give context, so there might be some relation between the forest area and the income group that you kind of want to highlight, and that's why you want to give this additional information in the same place, or also just as a nice kind of additional information block. Just like all things in DataViz, be intentional. Don't use a bunch of things in your pop-ups just because you can, but really think about, what do I need in my pop-ups, whether it's a chart or a map. Do I really need this additional information? And then another thing to be careful with is to format them properly. So I often see kind of pop-ups being a bit cluttered, not very nicely formatted, and a little bit difficult to see what's going on because some people tend to forget that they're also kind of part of the chart that has to be customized. So it would be better to just disable them than to keep them completely cluttered, which is also an option, and I will show you how. Pop-ups overall work in the same way in Flourish. But there are a few template-specific settings for the different pop-ups that have to do with how the templates work. And so today we're going to be going through some of the different templates and the different types of pop-ups that they come with, how to configure them, and also how to create kind of elaborate, complicated, custom pop-up situations, which is what I enjoy doing so much. If you have any questions during today's session, please message them into the chat, and then someone from the team will get back to you. I have lots of team members from the support desk with me here in the back, so they will happily answer any questions that you have if I'm moving too quickly. And you can also get in touch afterwards via priority support at flourish.studio. So first, we're going to look at pop-ups in the line bar pie template, which is one of our core templates and the most used and important templates for day-to-day DataViz, and so that's where we're going to start. And we're going to start with auto pop-ups. So I'm just going to jump into the app at this point. I've created some examples with pop-ups, and we're going to start with this line chart showing COVID-19 vaccination doses in different countries. And this is using auto pop-ups. So this is kind of what your pop-ups will normally look like whenever you create a chart in Flourish. They come through with the color of the series. So we can see here the series for the United Kingdom is this kind of orange yellow. So this header of the pop-up is in the same color. And then we have the time indication or the date and the value. That will always be the same. If we switch to the data tab to look at our data, which is what is being used to create this chart, we can see we have labels time in column A, and we have our values in columns B through Z. And those will always display in the pop-ups by default in exactly kind of this design. If you do have additional information that you'd like to display in your pop-ups, so in this example, I created this additional info for pop-ups column, then you can just add that in this info for pop-ups, info for custom pop-ups binding here. And you can just input that with the column that that additional information is in. In this case, it is additional information basically for each date, because it's going by row, and in this chart setup, the rows are the dates. So looking at that now, depending on where we hover, we kind of either get this hello or this additional info for pop-ups. And that will always take the column header as the title. So this is the default automatic pop-up setup, and often that is already enough, especially for kind of basic chart types. But sometimes we want to customize them further, and that's what we're going to be looking at next. But first, I also wanted to show you that you can do quite a bit of styling of the pop-ups themselves within the settings, so without having to add custom code or anything like that. And to do that, you can just scroll down to the pop-up settings, which you can find here. And then currently we have it set to auto, which is what we want, but then we can customize things like the pointer. So now we don't have that kind of little arrow shape or pointer pointing towards the line. We can remove the shadow. We can change the text color, maybe to red. Then everything will display in red, or at least it should. Yeah, there we go. Except for the column header, as that will always display in the color of the series by default. And lots of other things like alignment, font size, padding, the radius of the corners, etc. So you can also have like a black pop-up with rounded corners. There's lots of options there to configure, and all of those are available in the settings. So that's kind of as far as we can go for in terms of customizing our auto pop-ups. We can add things via this info for custom pop-ups column here. But what if we want to customize them even more? That is when you go for the custom option. In our example here, I'm just going to click through to it here. We used the custom options to pull through additional information and to kind of create a bit of a narrative maybe in a pop-up. Sometimes you might want to wrap your values in a sentence to make a bit more sense, or you want to rearrange things, like you don't want to have the country at the top, but you'd rather have it at the bottom of your pop-up, then you might want to use custom pop-ups. To enable custom pop-ups, you can just go into pop-ups, switch from auto, which is the default, to custom content. Sorry, everything's a little bit slow. I think it's because I'm screen sharing and it's quite a heavy chart with all these series. And then in custom content is where you can configure the way your pop-up content displays. I'm just going to go back to the one that we were using before as a starting point, so we can configure this all kind of step by step. So I'm going to switch to custom content, and I'm just going to switch this back to black because I don't really want it to be red. And now if I'm on custom content, by default, it will populate with this value 57.18. And that's kind of just the default custom value. Now what you can do, let's say we want to pull through something in a little bit of a sentence, something like on, and then we want the date. This many people had received a dose of vaccination in, and then country. So if we look at that now, nothing is really going to happen. It displays exactly like I just typed it. And that's where the handlebars syntax, or this kind of mini code language that we use for pop-ups in Flourish, comes into play. Because now you can actually access the underlying data from your data tab in these pop-ups with this syntax. And the syntax looks like this. If you have a column in your data set, so if I switch to the data tab and I have a column that contains the information that I want, so for example, the time or the date, which I do, then I can just grab the name of that column. So in this case, time, and I can wrap that in curly brackets or handlebars. And then I can just paste in that name. And now it's going to pull through that date. So now we have the date, but we don't yet have the name of the country, and we don't yet have the value. And to pull through the value, when you have kind of a column for each series, works a little differently than pulling through the name of the column, because you can't pull through the column itself, because each one has a different name. And so to access the value, there's another kind of special shortcut, which you can also see when you hover over this little question mark. It'll tell you how to kind of get there. This is the setting description. If you type an uppercase value, it will kind of pull through the current value. So now we can see we have the date and the value. We might want to add that per 100 people. And now finally for the country, again, we don't have a specific column, so we can't write the column name, but for the kind of series names or the column headers, we can just type series in capital letters and it will pull through the series title. So that is that. Now we can see that it's populating based on the content from our data tab using the name of the column or the value or the series. Those are the only two kind of shortcuts that you can use, this value and series or column name. Another thing that I like to do in custom pop-ups, just to kind of tie it all together a little bit more, I find this by default is very wide and it's kind of covering the label, is to just wrap everything in a div and give it a style with a max width. So you can do that like this. So maybe 100 pixels, oh, not 10. And then close that div. As you can see, I'm writing this in HTML. So that means that you can actually write any HTML here. You can use styling. You can use, oh, there we go. That has now updated and it's now 100 pixels wide, which looks a little bit better, I think, in this case. You can use that for things like that, but you can also just bolden parts of your text using these B tags. So maybe I want the date to be boldened, or you could color a certain word red, or you could input an image or a link, and lots more. We have a help doc on all things custom content in pop-ups, where we've also included quite a few examples. So you can take a look at this if you're interested in using custom content in your pop-ups. Here's an image, for example, or a link, or a link that opens in a new tab, or a video. So there's lots you can do. And yeah, check it out. Okay. Moving on to another type of custom pop-ups in the Line-Bar Pie template, which is a little bit of a special case because this doesn't exist in any other templates, is the series info pop-ups. So I'm just going to jump to my example again. And the way that this works is that you don't want to code the whole pop-up from scratch. You just want some additional information to display with each series, which in this case is the country. So if I hover here, I can see I have some additional information that's displaying with the Israel pop-up. So along with the date and the title, which is kind of default, I've also added this total vaccinations and an image. And you can do that also in the pop-up settings under series info. And this allows you to set the name of a series and then a double colon and then the content that you want to display with it. So in this case, I've really just had put this total vaccinations manually along with an image that we had hosted on Flourish. So this could be anything that you can choose as well. And it also supports custom HTML. It is important to note though that so the series pop-ups, so that you add custom content to each series, only works without custom content enabled. So you have to leave it on auto in terms of the overall content. And then you can set kind of additional information for each series. But if you were to set custom content and want to have custom series information, that would no longer work. So now it's kind of favoring the custom content over this series that I set down here. So that's a little bit of a quirk of the Line-Bar Pie, or not quirk, but feature, because you might want to display information for a series only without having to kind of code the whole thing from scratch. I'm going to take a sip of tea. Okay, those were, I believe, all my examples about Line-Bar Pie templates. I forgot to mention that I will be sharing these slides after the session on flourish.studio/training. So you'll be able to access them there and find all the links to the help docs as well as the examples. So you can just copy them from there. We are going to move on to another template where pop-ups are often used and very useful and very customizable. That is the projection map. And again, we're going to get started with the kind of default automatic display of pop-ups. So in the projection map, we have two layers. We have a points layer and a regions layer. The regions layer is the one that draws the regions, which you can see here, and the points is the one that you can enable to display points on top of those regions. I've disabled it now here, but if I would enable it, we can see the points. And then I'm just mentioning this because the pop-ups are configured for the different layers separately. So if I do enable my points layer, you'll notice that they receive a point section in the pop-ups here, but if I have them disabled, that will be hidden. But just so that you don't kind of customize the pop-ups for the wrong layer by accident. Here again, if you have auto pop-ups enabled, they will populate quite similarly to line bar pi based on the name and the values and the series that you've set. So in this case, if we look at our data, we have beer production in the US over a series of years. So you can input multiple values here. And then it will always pull through the name, it will pull through the current value, and it will pull through that kind of column header, so the year. If you have multiple column bindings, which we do here, in order to play through time, so we could drag this and go to a different year, then it will always automatically display the current year in the pop-up. So that's quite good already. So you could already leave it like this in most cases. But again, what if we wanted to do more? But first, I'm going to show you some styling tips here as well, because these work a little bit differently. The reason for that, or not work differently, but they have different styling options. The reason for that is that these are kind of newer. So all pop-ups in Flourish will sooner or later work like the ones here. It's just that most of the templates don't yet have this updated logic or updated settings. But when you enable the settings in this case, you'll notice that you have a few new things. For example, you have these header style options. You can choose from header inline and header block. Header inline will look like this, so it'll kind of color your header row the same as your main content. If you select header block, however, it will color that header with a background, and then you could also select a color for your background to match the rest of your chart. I really don't like this color picker. Yeah, there we go. You can also change the list type. So this defaults to the table view, I believe, but you could also make it so the table is that it kind of shows the column header and then the value in like a tabular view without the colon, but you could enable the colon by switching to list, and then it will show like 2019 colon value. And then you could also change the list separator here. So lots of new settings there, and these will be coming to more and more templates. I just wanted to mention that this works a little bit differently in this template at the moment, but the reason that it works differently is to make it easier for you so that you don't have to kind of hand code things just to have the header different, stuff like that. Okay, on to custom pop-ups in this template. Let's say we have some information that we want to include in our pop-ups, but not in others. If we just add that by default, if I switch to my data tab here, and here I also have this metadata for pop-ups here, where I can add additional information. So for example, image and information, but I don't have that image and information for each and every state. Then we can see that now it displays a bit weirdly by default. One reason for that is that it's set to this table view with a fixed height. So you might want to change that in the settings, but then still it's not ideal because our image is displaying as a URL and instead of as an actual image. And so in this case, in order to show it as an image or as a link, and also maybe to rearrange it a bit, you would have to use custom pop-ups again. And so I'm just going to show you how I did that. I'm just going to jump to the finished example because I realized that I'm a bit slow. This one is here, I believe. So here in this example, we have added formatting to our pop-ups by switching to custom pop-ups. And then we've also added some kind of almost conditional logic to hide pop-ups for regions where we don't have that information. So if we go into our pop-ups and panels, which I will get to in just a moment, another new thing, settings, then we can find the custom content options here. And then if we open this up, we can see what this actually looks like. So what I'm doing here is I am setting my image as a div with a background of my URL image. This works in the same way. I can point to a column using these curly braces, and then I'm pulling through the paragraph of information, again, with the handlebar brackets. In this case, you can also pull through specific values for a certain year by using the value option. So for example, you of course only want to have the current year's data, so then you can use value to get that. And similarly, to get the column header of that year's data, you can use metric, which in this case is the year. So those are kind of the projection map equivalents to the value and series shortcuts that we encountered earlier. What I also did here, which is the special case for kind of hiding content, is I wrapped everything in a div with a class of no information, or with a class of the contents of the column no information, which is the curly brackets. And then if I switch to my data tab, I can find my column no information, and I have input a value or a string of no information in each cell where I don't have this additional information. And then what I do is I set that as a class, and I say, if it is no information, then don't display it. And that's basically how I hide this paragraph and image for every state where it doesn't exist. This is a little bit of a wacky one and a little bit of a tricky one to wrap your head around in the beginning maybe, but we also have a help doc specifically on this use case with exactly this example. So you will be able to follow the steps there, hopefully, and you can also get in touch if you have a use case like this. But just to know that it's possible sometimes is nice. Okay, moving on in terms of custom pop-ups in the projection map, there's even more crazy stuff you can do. For example, you can draw charts in your pop-ups with data from your data tab. It's quite amazing, and it looks like this. And the way it works in this case is in our data tab, we have these different percentages of how many people voted for a certain party in a certain county. And then we've bound these to our metadata for pop-ups column. And then what we're doing is we are, just scrolling down to the pop-up settings. We're drawing a whole chart for each of those percentages by kind of just filling a span with the width of the percentage. So again, a bit crazy and out of the box, but it does allow you to create amazing things like this. So I did want to mention, and we also have a full help doc on this one that you can follow the steps. So if you ever wanted to kind of create charts with data that's in your data tab, this is your friend. Okay, also in the projection map, we already saw it in the title of the settings, pop-up panels. A whole new world of pop-ups is opening up in front of our eyes. And it's currently live in our projection map where we saw it and radar templates. And we will be updating other templates to include this updated way of working as well. But at the moment, those are the only two places you'll find it. But basically the way it works is that you can now, in addition to configuring a pop-up, you can also configure a panel. So I've created an example of that here using the same example that we've been using, showing some content on hover. And then it says, click to see more information. And then you can click, and then it opens up this beautiful panel, which is empty in this case, but you can fill it with all kinds of things. So in this case, we're filling it with our image and our content that we already met before, but you can even fill it with other charts. And this works in the same way as the pop-ups work. You can input custom content And you can also use all kinds of HTML and things. So looking at the setup here, now we have set it to display pop-ups and panels. So we set both instead of just pop-up. Then we set custom content for a pop-up, which is the header and the click to see more information. If you leave that at auto, it just says click to see more. So you can just leave it like that, might be a bit easier. And then in our panel, we've also configured custom content, and we're displaying the information that we were previously displaying in our pop-up. You can also select from quite a few different layout positions. It's pretty cool. There's lots to explore here. You can select left, right, top, bottom. You can also say, I want you to always show, so that it kind of is always there. And it could say, it could also have some placeholder content here. And then depending on where you click, it kind of populates with something else. So this is brand new. We just deployed it last week in the projection map. So you might have already encountered it, you might have not. But yeah, as I said, it gives lots more options of what to do in the projection map. It kind of gives you the option to use your projection map as an entry point to kind of more data, to explore more data. One example of where it was used was in the One Foundations project. I'm just quickly going to show our adaptation of their project, where they have this map of Africa, and then you can click on a country and you kind of get this panel with all this information. And this is done in exactly the way that I just showed you. So it has embedded a chart, and then it has different headers with different information, which is pulling from different columns in the data set. We also just added a help doc on adding charts in pop-up panels today. So if that is something that you wanted to explore, you can do that. Here's another example using the radar template, which is also where this new pop-up functionality is live, where you can click and then it can open a panel. And then, yeah, as you can see here, you can even embed charts. So it's quite cool. And it's really just becoming more flexible. I think that's that. I'm going to race through a few other pop-up functionalities in other templates. As I mentioned in the beginning, they work a little bit differently across different templates. I only have 2 more minutes, so I'm going to try and be quick, and otherwise the slides will be online for you to explore. But just quickly, the table template also supports custom pop-ups, which many people don't know about. So if we look at this example here, you can actually hover over the different cells, and then it will populate. You can input text, you can format that text, but you can also input images, etc. The hierarchy template also supports custom pop-ups. These are a little special. The reason for this is the data structure of this template. You can only configure custom pop-ups for rows where there's for shapes representing a single row. So for example, romance is a category which has multiple kind of children underneath it, because this is a nested template with kind of multiple layers of data. But a certain film, so if we go into Fox comedy, I think I put it here, 27 Dresses, then you can actually configure further pop-up content. And that works in exactly the same way as we already encountered. You can configure custom HTML, pulling through information from the underlying data set. This is really helpful if you are kind of displaying certain categories, but you also want to give that additional information in the pop-up about what the lead studio was or the audience score, even if we're not actually sizing by it. I had one more example, so I'm just going to overrun by 1 minute, which is the marker map template, which offers a little bit of an easy way of dealing with images in pop-ups, so you don't have to kind of code them, but you can just select an image binding. So if we look at this example, which is our marker map, which lets you kind of input different markers, images, and icons on top of a tile map. Then we have this photo binding here, where you can input an image and then link to that. and then that will display by default. So without having to write any custom pop-up code. But that's the only one that offers that, I'm afraid. Okay, that was my quick overview of custom pop-ups. I hope you found it useful and not too overwhelming. Let me know if you have any questions. You can reach us at this email address, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.